2. The sky's the limit. A Kentuckian once asked what he considered the boundaries of the United States. The boundaries of our country, sir, he replied. Why, sir, on the north we are bounded by the aurora borealis, on the east we are bounded by the rising sun, on the south we are bounded by the precession of the equinoxes, and on the west by the day of judgment. The American, Joe Miller. 1. The eagle screams. In a wild country, it was good business for wild men to go about scaring people with strange noises and by making terrible faces playfully. But as the hunter was displaced by the second and third orders of the back settlers, the squatter and the homesteader, the roars and screamers were not only hollered out but outlicked by a new type of boaster and tall talker. This was the boomer and the boaster, drunk not of his own powers, but with the bigness of the country and the illusion of inexhaustible resources and opportunities. Here history repeated itself. As the backwoodsman's antics and war cries were partially to intimidate the Indian, so the advocates of Western expansion and settlement borrowed from the backwoodsman the elbow motif. This had been given expression for all time of Daniel Boone when in 1799, at the age of 65, he was asked why people were leaving Kentucky for frontier Missouri. Too many people, too crowded, I want more elbow room. The frontier also had a saying, when you see the smoke of your neighbor's chimney, it's time to move. The backwoodsman, says a Crockett Almanac in 1838, was a singular being always moving westward like a buffalo before the tide of civilization. He does not want a neighbor nearer than 10 miles, and when he cannot cut down a tree that will fall within 10 rods of his log house, he thinks it is time to sell out his betterments and be off. But to the expansionists and the promoters of free land in the West, elbow room meant room for improvements, for free enterprise, and so more neighbors, in terms of nothing less than a continent of manifest destiny. With the movement for territorial expansion and free land, the country entered upon one of the greatest advertising campaigns in history, the booming of the West. This was a campaign which statesmen and orators joined the land and railroad companies, farmers' organizations, departments of agriculture, bureaus of immigration, boards of trade, and chambers of commerce. The theme of countless speeches, immigrant handbooks, immigrants and railroad guides, state and regional guidebooks and gazetteers, state yearbooks, rural almanacs, real estate directories, and government reports was, "The sky's the limit. Watch us grow. We don't have to prove it, we admit it." In style, this propaganda rivaled the expensive eloquence of ring-tailed lawyer and the stump speaker. Its flamboyant ballyhoo provided that, more than the protective coloration of the homespun hero playing the tough guy and the smart aleck, tall talk is the highfalutin style of the provincial Americans whose motto is bragging saves advertising. In the vanguard of Western expansion was another screamer, the American eagle. This favorite fowl of orators was derived from the American emblem in the Great Seal and in coinage, not according to Franklin, the most appropriate emblem of America. But the bird suffers not so much from a bad moral character, generally poor and often very lousy, and a rank coward, ascribed to it by Franklin as sheer triteness. From the aspects of the Allegheny to the summit of Mount Hood, the bird of America was so often made to take flight that a shadow may be said to have worn a trail across the basin of the Mississippi. The scream of the expansionist eagle was heard, and the swelling peroration of Samuel C. Pomeroy's expansion plea of the Homestead Bill, whose passage climaxed a 10 years debate in Congress on the free land question. Both the patriotic epidemic and the spread eagle oratory of expansionism are taken off a mock speech on the Oregon question by comedian Yankee Hill. His peroration is in the tall talking tradition of change the name of Arkansas? Hell no. 2. The Wonder State. In his speech on the land policy of the United States, cited above, the Honorable Richard Yates expressed the hope that we will not be governed by the narrow considerations of a sectional jealousy. A railroad in Illinois, like a lighthouse on the seacoast, is a common property of the nation. We have one country. Our interests are one, our history is one, Our destiny is the same, a glorious destiny of free and sovereign states to unexampled power and renown. But it is the destiny that the prerogative of free and sovereign states to claim, each in its own way, an unexampled power of renown. State nicknames, which have become part of the folklore of American places, crystallize these local aspirations of pretensions and uniqueness and excellence. The Boomer's Paradise, Oklahoma, the Garden of the West, Illinois and Kansas, the Land of Heart's Desire or the Land of Sunshine, New Mexico, the Land of Plenty, New Mexico and South Dakota, and the Wonder State, Arkansas. As an instance of the willingness with each state government took on the leading in telling the world of our wonderful possibilities, one may point to the concurrent resolution of the Arkansas Senate approving the nickname of the Wonder States, virtually an agreement in favor of changing the name of Arkansas. The objection to the earlier nickname of the Bear State is typical of the desire of the self-conscious West to live down the frontier past, commemorated by such uncomplimentary terms as the Puke State, Missouri, and the Grasshopper State, Kansas. The Prince of State Greeters and Boosters was Robert Love Taylor, 1850 to 1910, the fiddling governor of Tennessee and the apostle of love, laughter, and sunshine, who devoted his sky painting talents as orator, editor, and writer chiefly to booming the South. His village apocalypse quality and his inventive epic earnestness have been praised by another village improviser, Philip Lindsay, in this poem. Preface to Bob Taylor's birthday. For all his Pollyanna optimism and his mush and syrup sentiment, Taylor had something of the folk touch in his art of improvisation and a backwoodsy homeliness of his native figures and illusions. Above all, he had a big heart, which went out to all big things such as Uncle Sam, Dixie, and Tennessee, or any state that exerted or felt the influence of the sunny South. Here is a tall talk in the plug that swallow-tailed coat, the striped trousers, and glad-handed Uncle Sam. The advertising pages of Bob Taylor's magazine, a monthly address to all parts of the prosperous South, were filled with the come-on invitations of the Southwest Railroad and Lane Companies and commercial clubs, for whose promotion Taylor had set a pace in his editorials and essays in October 1906, gave a cue to the following cure. Have you a Board of Trade or a Chamber of Commerce or a Boosters Club? A southern town now without a live Board of Trade might do disincorporate and go back into the woods. One of the most elaborate in these advertisements rivaled Taylor's lush pen was depicting the farmlands in the Nueces River Valley as a paradise on earth, worthy of Teddy Roosevelt's characterization of Texas as the garden spot of the land. 3. God's Country. Besides manifest destiny, free land, and state pride, the West had another thing under its bow, longbow which it drew in order to live down its wild and woolly reputation and to attract settlers. This was the myth of the land flowing with milk and honey, part of the American dream of a promised land of plenty, opportunity, and beginning, which was first attracted settlers to the Old World and to the New, and was now transferred to the fabulous far-off West. To make its ardors outweigh its endurances, orators, promoters, and guidebook writers painted this unknown country in the rosy hues of fairyland. The land of nature's bounty was God's country, defined as a special part of the United States or the country as a whole, viewed nostalgically as almost a paradise. God's country was sometimes a country one was going to, perhaps always going to, and never reaching, like the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. And it was sometimes a place that no one was going back to. Or perhaps it was only in the heart, not a place but a state of mind. To Boone, in retrospect, it was real enough, the Kentucky he had left behind him. I've traveled, he said in his old age, over many new countries in the great Mississippi Valley, and I've critically examined their soils, their mineral wealth, their healthful climates, and their manufacturing situations, and the commercial advantages given them by nature. I've discovered where these endowments were given most bountifully in many localities, singly or in groups, but I have never found but one Kentucky, a place on earth where nature seems to have concentrated all her bounties. For many a pioneer settler, however, who, while in quest of God's country, often had to ask, is this God's country or not? And has God forsaken us? There was only this consolation left at the end of the search. We learned that God's country isn't in the country, it is in the mind. As we look back now, we knew that all the time we were hunting God's country, we had it. We worked hard, we was loyal, honest, we was happy. For 48 years we lived together in God's country. The potency of this phrase was part of the pioneer myth. This assumed that the land, which should be as free as the air and the sunshine, was a symbol of the inalienable rights of man, that all land was good land and all settlers were good farmers, and that in its green pastures one should not want. That the land had certain imperishable values of its own which could not be derived, not only substance and profit, but also strength and courage, and that the pioneer, inured with self-reliance through hardship and disencouragement, was a soldier of civilization and of God. 4. Withal, there is an effective climate. In a land of violent extremes and abrupt contrasting weather, the climate, the quest for health and happiness, put a premium on optimum environments. Land advertisements boasted of such advantages as dry, bracing air, 300 or more days of sunshine a year, and negatively no killing frosts, hail, blizzards, hot winds, heat waves, tornadoes, cyclones, whirlwinds, hurricanes, earthquakes, or similar afflictions. Why shovel snow and shiver was a rhetorical question. No chill, no Negroes, no saloons, no mosquitoes, went a sweeping statement from Arkansas. The guidebooks were equally reassuring. It is complained that the wind blows. As it blows everywhere, so it blows in Colorado, occasionally. Sometimes these winds are monumentally disagreeable, but they serve nature as her sanctuary measures, and the effect of refreshing beneficial. Withal, there is an effective climate, and something of a freedom caught in the outdoorness of life. Sunshine and green salads all the year will promote cheerfulness. Where there are no bitter winds, no sleet or hail, no blizzards to kill flocks and herds, no cold snaps to freeze poultry on the perch or water pipes in the kitchen, it is not at all surprising that people laugh and are affected by the great world of sun and summer in which they dwell. Immigrant and Western songs fell in line with chauvinism, utopianism, and Arcadianism of the guidebooks, reflected in many a state song and poem of the sweet singer, or boasting variety in many popular song with nostalgia for this, that, or the other wonder state. The boast of a climate so healthy that people rarely die except from accident or old age, as one in the Nenson's River Valley land advertisement, was a common. One of the best of the stories on this theme was related to Barnum, as he heard it from a sleight-of-hand artist named Henry Hawley. Related to the stories of life-prolonging air are the stories of air that restores life. In East Texas, it is the wind that revives corpses. Truth of it is, Dad was dead, but we put that cotton bust open, that strong, healthy plains wind hit him and just filled his lungs with good reviving air, and Dad nor no one else could stay dead. In Florida, it is the sunshine, as on the occasion when the corpse of a gangster has been imported from Chicago so that a funeral could be staged by local dealer cemetery lots. The coffin was taken to the graveside and the lid was opened to give the bystanders a glimpse of the beautiful way the corpse had been laid out, a masterpiece of the undertaker's work. As the Florida sunshine hit the body, there was an immediate stir. The gangster rose with a yell and feeling for his gun. The bystanders had to kill him again before they could go on with the funeral. Variations on a theme are found in the stories of a dying person being revived by the air expelled from a bicycle or automobile tire, which had been pumped up in California or Arizona, or of the incurable victim of tuberculosis being healed by a single ray of Florida sunshine. Rival claims of Salvier's climate are accompanied with mutual recrimination of each state rivalry's keen. Thus, Florida papers cast aspirations on California as a terrible place, going rapidly to a bad with frosts, storms, earthquakes, and other calamities. California and other resort places reciprocate. So the older feud between Florida and California has more recently been added to the competition between California and the Rio Grande Valley. But we have the healthiest climate in California. It's so healthy we have to shoot a man in order to start a graveyard. That's no comparison to our valley climate of health. One of our citizens went out to California, took sick, and died there. As he was shipped his remains back to the valley, and friends of the deceased were gathered round the corpse. When they opened the casket, he raised up and greeted his friends and walked off. Tacked on to Hawley's yarn is the tale of a monstrous large gun, which required 1 pound of powder and 4 pounds of shot to load it properly, and with which Haley shot off 4.5 bushels in wild pigeons' feet and legs, without killing a single bird. When the flock rose off the ground, just half a second ahead of the shot. A great number of pigeons and a large field of buckwheat which were feared they would destroy reflect the abundance of crops and game associated with the marvels of the climate and soil. Here he brags about rich land and big crops shade off the yarns of varying degrees of exaggeration. The Boosters Club gives way to the Liars Club, with the occasional knock for the famine that often followed the feast, or the bust that followed the boom. In 1851, the Commissioner of Patents reported that address delivered by A. Williams, Esquire, at a meeting of San Francisco for presenting premium of a silver goblet offered by Mr. C. A. Shelton for the best varieties of vegetables and grains. Among other prize products are an onion weighing 21 pounds, a turnip which equally exacted in the top of the flour barrel, another weighing 100 pounds, a cabbage measuring 13 feet 6 inches around, a beet weighing 63 pounds, and carrots 3 feet in length weighing 40 pounds, not to mention a single potato larger than the size of an ordinary hat, of which 12 persons partook at a dinner in Stockton, leaving at least half untouched. Then the speaker added ironically, "And we've had still larger and taller specimens of other things near home, here in our city, to which many will hear me bear witness of experience, and which outcome to maturity, monthly in advance, rents the tallest kind of rents, put up higher than the pines, and sometimes harder to get around than the redwood." 5. Laughing it off. Praise of the wonders and glories of the new country was offset by a healthy skepticism which viewed with alarm instead of pointing with pride. Hardship and failure gave rise to inverse exaggerations and offensive boasting, of the kind that proceeds from having too little rather than too much. A common symbol of disillusionment was a returning immigrant or prospector admonishing the westward traveler to turn back. In the frontispiece of Major Wilkie's narrative, a fashionable young man in stark chase behind a spirited horse proclaims, "I'm going to Illinois," whereas from the lips of the broken-down owner of a broken-down wagon, a broken-down-winded horse, a broken-hearted wife, a broken-legged dog, and what is still more to be lamented, an irreparable broken constitutions of my 3-fevered unused sons, Jonathan, Jerry, and Joe, replied Eminence. "I've been," a modern parallel furnished by the Grapes of Wrath, "in the Jodes, and on their way where it's rich and green, and they can get work and a piece of growing land with water, are laughed at by a ragged man who inquires, 'Folks going to California, I bet. I told you that,' said Pa. 'Well, guess nothing,' the ragged man said slowly. 'Me, I'm coming back. I've been there. I'm going to starve. I'd rather starve over the concept.' Disappointed victims of gold fever, who had been advised not to be so sanguine of success, turned back with mottos properly amended and expressed their disgust. Busted by thunder, set a pattern for slogans all settlers who did not have the grit, grace, and gumption necessary to tough it out in the tough country. Disillusionment, in turn, was seasoned with historical humor of the type known as laughing it off, or smiling in the face of adversity. Grasshopper plagues were commemorated in the wagon inscription. Hoppers ate all but the wagon sheet, and saying that the grasshoppers had eaten everything except for the mortgage, and in the story of the grasshopper who ate the farmer's team of mules and then pitched the horseshoes for the wagon. In Nebraska, one could stand by the side of a field and hear the grasshoppers threatening. On the potato vines, they could eat downward, and then there came a potato bug who would calmly kick it and go down in a devastating way. On the Great Plains, it has been said, if you ain't burned up by the drought and the winds hot as hell or frozen out by blizzards and hailstorms, you'll be eaten up by grasshoppers, speculators, and politicians. And it might have been added centipede snakes, bedbugs, fleas, and other pests that infested the primitive shelters of pioneer settlers. This is a plant western hard times, the songs of the vain country bachelor, which prove that only thin lines separate stoicism and revolt.